Hi YouTube, welcome back to Wtf Rc Cars. So we're continuing with the build of the XT2. Now I have gone ahead and skipped a few bits. I will bring you in for a close-up look just to point out a few things that you need to be aware of, but just in interest of getting this build moving on, and I don't want this to end up being an 8-part video. So I've tried to concentrate on the bits where I think people could get a little bit stuck or confused, and then the chassis rails and putting these front steering mechanism together and the front A-arms, it's just the same process as the rear. There's not really anything that'll catch you out, but I will bring you in and give you a close-up look of what we've done, just in case there is something that you're questioning when you're following build. But let's get you in for a close-up look and we'll carry on with the XT2 and hopefully get it finished, this one. Right, so the chassis rails, pretty self-explanatory. These can flip over either way, they can go on either way round. Your steering hubs, all you've got to make sure is the pills that you insert into this part. I've gone with the stock sort of build, and if you look on the back of these, you've got a hole, and you've got a hole on the front, and it's the 0-degree ones, so you've got a hole towards the top and towards the bottom, and it goes in front back that way. So the top, the hole is up at top when you put it together. That is the way round that the hubs go, but you have got an R and L on them, so it's not like you can get stuck putting them together. And the steering assembly just goes together like that. On the underside of it, you've literally just got that piece that we've fitted on top of the brace that holds the suspension arms in, and that's the way round your arm should go. But I didn't really see any point dragging the video out any longer than it needed to be for that, because they're pretty self-explanatory how they go together. Right, let's continue with build. Right, so continuing on with build, we've built these up. These are 53.5mm, and all you've got to remember when you put the ends in these, the 8mm ones go to the side furthest away from where you'd adjust the turnbuckle. Your shorter ones are in the end, and then you want 2 of these built up, and these are 58.3mm, and you just have one of the olives facing down and one facing back. So let's get these assembled. So the initial settings that you're going for are the innermost on the hubs and the outermost on your center mount. You're gonna want, let's get this right, these little bevel shims, and these are going to be on the center where you mount it. Right, so looks like these mount on that sort of way round, so you want one of the beveled shims, and then we're going for the outer innermost hole on the hub. And then again, long one to a center. And then we'll fasten that one to the hub. Right, so to mount this, you're going to want one of the counter head screws, one of the little aluminium washers, and then if you just move the steering to one side, should be able to line that up nicely. Then we're going to get one of his other screws, and you should be able to drop that straight through, and then just get the locking nut on the back. and then we're just looking to repeat that with the opposite side. And we should have some pretty decent lined up suspension and steering. Right, moving on to the shocks. So the short ones are going to be the front, and for this you want the dampers for initial setting, 1.6 mil holes, and they've got a little tiny 1 and a 6 on, a bit awkward to see. Then you want your little C-clip on, or E-clip, whatever you want to call them. And then you want to place your damper on. Now, I usually try and do this facing up, because then if I take the top cap off, I can quickly see what number damper's on it. But we are just building this to completely stock settings. So you're going to need 2 short ones built up like that for front, and 2 longer ones for the rear with the 1.7 setting on it, 1.7 mil holes in the damper. So I shall quickly get all these put back together and then get back to you. So this is basically the order that we're putting all shocks together. So you want the thinnest O-ring, and then I tend to use a little bit of the shock oil that's actually going in to put on the O-rings. Then you want your flat shim, then we're going to want another O-ring, and I put a little bit of shock oil on that. Then you're going to want the cap with the top facing out. Then you want to screw the end down a bit, and then if you get the piston and you just screw it, it should screw through the seals, and that way you're not going to be risking ripping them. Then you can tighten the cap down, and we're going to want our shock pliers, and we're going to want to screw the bottom of the shock absorber on. And it says leave 1 to 1.5 mil gap on the end of the threads. Then once we've got that, you can get the adjuster, and it does ask you to put a little bit of oil on these just to stop the O-ring tearing as you screw it onto the shock. And then you can screw that into place or get it somewhere near where you're going to need it. And then you're going to want to fill these shocks, so it's 650 in the front and 550 in the rear for the dirt one anyway. And you can stick it down and you can wait for it to get some bubbles out of it. It does say fill them completely level. So then we're going to need a shock cap, and we're going to want to put one of those O-rings carefully into the bottom. Now again, it does say put a tiny bit of oil on this. is just to stop it getting torn. So basically how it tells us to do this is screw the shock cap on, then carefully bring the shock up, and it says that should expel the excess oil. And then it asks us to place the screw in, and then it just wants us to move the shock over its full extent 6 times. Then push the shock shaft all the way in, take out the screw again, and yep, like it says, you'll get a tiny little bit more of the excess oil out, and then you can screw your shock back together and it's all done. And if you screw it in with it set all the way in, you've got 0% rebound. So let's get that done to the rest of them. Right, so starting with the front shocks, we've got a springs. Not sure if there's any identification markings on the front ones, can't see them. Ah, there is, right on top. So I like to put them so you can see them. So we want one of them on, and then we're going to have to put the basic shock in place. I'm just going to wind them down so the just on spring to start with. Then you've got to get an olive in the bottom, and then you're going to want an olive in the top. So that's got one. So what I like to do, if I've put one of them in that way round, I like to put the other in the opposite way round, because then when you build it you can have your, decide if you want your screws facing in or out, whichever's easiest way to get to them. So that is our shocks. They feel nice. Always worth checking, just make sure they're all built right, they're all the right length. So right, so we are now moving on to bag 7, and this is where we're going to be fitting a servo and everything else that's going into this build. Let's see what servo we've got. I think for this one I'm going to want a nice fast servo, so we're going to be going with the Ludicrous Lipos one, as long as it all fits. And we got a whole bunch of steering arms for this, but I think I'm going to go with a metal one if I've got one to fit it. So the specs on this are 6 volt 0.07, 7.4 volt is 0.06, 8.4 volt is 0.052. Torque, we have from 6 volt 16 kilograms of torque, or 222 ounce inch. 7.4 volt is 19 kilograms, 264 ounce inch, and 8.4 volt is 23 kilogram, 320 ounce inch. Really nice servos, and nice shout out to guys at Ludicrous Lipos for sending me that one. So that's going to be a servo, nice black cable on it as well. And we're now going to need bag 7. So I've quickly set up a new model memory. We've got the FGR4S receiver, we've got a servo plugged in, we've got a bind plug in, and I find it handy to just have one of these little battery packs around.
Binding successful.
Oh, that is a smooth sounding servo. So we've got it set up, just running standard 380 Hz at minute, but that has our servo centered nicely. Right, so we want to start by making the steering linkage. You've got a little hex head in there, lets you screw it in, so just leave 4mm poking out and then you can just screw them together. And you're going to want this at an offset angle. So once we've got that together, we're then looking for the longer of the 2 little ball adapters, and we're going to pop that in. And then you're going to need this tiny little olive, and that's going into the opposite side. So we've got that assembled. Then it's telling us to note the orientation of these as they go onto servo. So we've got these two, then we're going to have a servo, so it's telling us we want them face down, and then we're going to want a washer. So you want all 4 of your washers in and your screws, and I'm just going to leave that a bit loose because I'm not sure how that's going to position with the actual servo. Yeah, as I thought, that's nowhere near where it needs to be. So we're going to have to loosen these off. So I think they're definitely going to have to move towards the outer edge of the servo. Right, so for this, hopefully I can get this Wtf Rc servo on to fit, but we shall have to see. Might be too big. So we've got the servo on mounted, then you're going to have to pay attention to which order it's telling you to use the shims. So coming through from the back, right, so in the little bag of spares that you get with the Xray kits, I've found a screw that seems better suited. So if we pop that in, and then I believe on the end of this it's threaded. Not sure what size Allen key it needs. Might be a 3mm. But basically you can screw that on. So let's grab a 3mm Allen key. So yeah, that that olive's a 3mm. So you can tighten all that up. So that is basically what we want to be looking at. Right, so we should be left with these two shims, and we now get to try and screw it all in. So let's bring the RC back in. So what we're looking for is to get the servo lined up somewhere close, and then get the arm and it says we should be going for that outer hole, but it says we're going to be using these shims, so let's see how close we can get this. Now it looks like that position feels pretty good, so let's get the servo screwed in first, or at least the servo mounts in place. So once we got these servo mounts in place, we can then try and line the servo up and get it somewhat central. And luckily the MIP ball drivers can get into that still, because I think that'd be a bit awkward if you ain't got some ball drivers to get in there. I don't think we're going to need an awful lot of trouble on that servo, but it's in there and it's nice and solid, and we've got nothing fouling or catching anywhere. So let's continue. Right, we are now going to be building up the sway bar. So we're going to want two of the weird shaped little ones and two of the normal ones. Then it looks like it's asking us to screw these in, but leave them out 1mm. Then once we've got them in, you're going to want to pop them on with the holes for the grub screws facing upwards. Then we've got a bunch of different size grub screws, so which ones are we going to need? Looks like we're using the longer. So you should have two really short ones. So the two really short ones are for holding the sway bar. So we're going to need them in the top. Then we should have our little sway bar. So then you're going to want to grab these, and we don't need them, we just need the ones that look like little caps. And we're going to want this, because obviously that side is already on there, so we're not going to need them. So the sway bar is going to go together in that kind of orientation, with the sway bar sticking out towards the back. So if you flip this over, the bigger hole is going to want to go to the back where the screws are. Then you want your little grub screws in to stop your sway bar rattling around everywhere. And if you just wiggle it around as you're tightening it up, you'll feel it slowly start to pinch on the sway bar, but you can tell that it's not restricting its movement or holding it. So you want the sway bar to be able to move but not rattle. So once we've got that together, we're then going to have to bring the RC back. So let's see how good positioning is of this. Well, we're definitely not going to be able to use the servo where it is there, because that's going to hit on that. So let's see what we can do about positioning our steering and getting it somewhere more usable. So I think first thing we're going to do is drop the steering back. So let's see if we can move the entire servo back another position, and then see if we can use that for steering instead. So can we go with that one and the servo dropped back? That would certainly make the steering straighter, but will that go on? Yep, that looks like that'll go on, so it can live there. So a steering arm straight when it's at either extreme. So hopefully we get better steering like that. But back to the task at hand. So that needs to be placed like that, and then we want 12mm screws. Right, now you should be able to lift the sway bar over, and then that's got to be mounted down to that. And I believe that one wants 14mm screws. And then you just need to pop the sway bar ends on. And usually I find the only way to do this is to pop them on with a screwdriver from underneath. Like that. And that seems to get them on properly. So next we're going to put the shock tower on, and you just want 4 10mm screws into this one, so we'll get that done. Right, so moving on, we're going to put the shock mounts on, and these are just going to screw in, and then we're going for initial setting is the innermost. So we're going for the innermost on the front, so we'll get them screwed in. Right, once you have them put in, we're going to take a front shock. We're going to pass it down. You're going to slide the top into position, and then you're going to want a small locking nut screwed onto the end, and then initial settings are going to be for the center screw hole. So if you get that passed through, then you're just going to need to screw that bottom screw in and the top screw, and I try and keep the bleed screws on the outside, so we'll get them put on. So now moving on to the rear, we're going to put these two standoffs in, and again they're going in center position to start with, so we'll get them in place. Right, so onto the rear shocks. So you're going to want to get one in place, then you've got the lock nut to put on, and we've got one screw in the bottom, and the initial settings for these are the outermost holes. So we're just going to screw it on there in the outermost position, and then we'll get that tightened up and repeat it on the opposite side. So let's get the motor and pinion and everything ready, and we'll get that into position. Right, so moving on, it's telling us to use two 10mm screws to mount the motor. So I'm just going to quickly get that somewhere near. It doesn't feel like anything's catching, so it looks like his motor's still going to be able to turn. So we should be able to get his pinion on, and it looks like that's the way around the pinion goes on these. So initially I'm going to try a 25 tooth pinion, and we just need to get the gear meshing right. So let's try a thin bit of paper in between his pinion and spur. I'm just going to tighten the motor screws and then wind that out. I like to try it all the way around, make sure we've got no tight spots or any loose spots. Yep, that seems good. Now just quickly double check the alignment, make sure it's as close as possible, and then we have a motor fastened in. So moving on now, it looks like we're going to use this bit, and you've got the inside sort of curved out for the motor. Then we're going to want the olive just pressed into the top of this. Then that's going to go together like that. Then we need another two 10mm screws, and these just go through the top. So we can get them in position. Then we need a 16mm screw, so that should be this one. It looks like it comes through from the motor side. That holds that together quite nicely. Then we should be left with two of these screws for the bottom. It looks like they're going to line up as they should do. So that now has our motor securely in position with all the mounts, and this is the quick run 10.5 turn 3650 motor. For the speed controller, which it's asking us to now mount the speed controller and our receiver. And then we've got a nice clear path for our speedo cables. So speed controller cables have got a nice clear path for the battery wires. So if we bring the switch down that side, we're going to go with channel 1 that side. How long is our motor sensor wire? So a sensor wire is going to go that way, then we're going to have as motor wires running the same way, so we should be able to keep it relatively tidy. So we've just got as capacitor bank to stick in. So that should keep everything out of its way. It's telling us to use these to locate where his battery clips are going to sit. So we're going to need one of these in each side. But it does only tell you to fit one. Then we're going to need there's 2 clips to hold his batteries down. So it's basically the same fitment as most of the other Xray RCs of late. So it's telling us to put these in just one gap away. So then we're going to need a battery to see where these are going to sit. So I've got a few different batteries I can run for this, but let's see how these Team Orions fit, or not, as the case may be. These batteries always sound and feel like they're about to split. So we need to unscrew that one a little bit. So that's going to be somewhere close, so you should be able to then wind down the little locking nuts. So they just need to be tightened up and locked into place where they are. So for the time being, if we just use a cable tie and get them into position, then we just need to solder some connectors on. Now it doesn't matter which way around the poles are on battery, they're not going to pull on anything, and as motor wires should nicely hold everything in place. So, soldering time. Right, so we've got it cut to length. And because we can spin these, so that's his blue wire. Now I could use a bigger soldering iron that would probably melt it quicker, but I like to go nice and steady. So we can have all three of them really tidy. Now to decide, do I want these cables at that side? Probably. Right, we just need some bullet connectors. We should be fine to go with these. Right, so there we have all his ESC wires and everything soldered on. We've got some battery terminals, so we should be able to go negative, positive, right, so that's everything connected. So let's get as negative and as positive. Power up. Power up as controller. So I want to reverse this servo. So we've got it set on forward throttle and brake, that needs to be changed. Let's set a sub trim first. That looks somewhere near. Let's roughly set as endpoints. So we've got nice quick steering, and we've got a throttle, brake and reversers working.
Signal lost, shutting down.
So let's see what its finishing touches are. Right, so body mount wise, On the rear we just have these two that fasten on. So let's have a look how it's telling us to mount these. So apparently it's just one 10mm screw straight through back, 12mm screw should I say. I think that's all we've got left. So we just need to mount these well, they feel pretty sturdy. Then you need one of your little pins. It says these go in third hole up. And then we've got the front mounts, and these you just need to position on the front and just screw them from underneath. So that's the front mounts in position. And then your pins on these, again it's saying third front bottom. And then all we've got left is a bunch of spare screws that come in the spares bag. We've got the little nuts, plastic nuts to fasten the rear spoiler on. So we'll need to get that done when we get the body done. And two little bits of foam, I'm guessing they're for battery. The battery clips you can just move around to line the battery up wherever you see fit. I think I'm going to play about with them a little bit, but I think I'm quite happy with where it is at the moment. Right, so that's it with a quick tidy up. So we've got battery that's easy to plug in and disconnect. Motor cables, nice tidy all that way. Switch, easy to get to. Servo fully mounted. Body mounts are in their initial position. I'll get the body out right and then clip them more than likely. But I think it's come out quite tidy. I could have gone for a flat sensor cable and then sent it under the battery, but seems like you've got all rest up wires coming off at top here. I don't see how it's going to make any difference. It's not really going to tidy it up at all. But let's wrap this one up. Right, so there we have it, almost finished. The Xray XT2 22 model. This is the dirt model. I think the only difference is slightly different shock fluid and the ball diff instead of the gear diff. You can buy the other bits and you can swap the shock fluid out to make them exactly the same, so it's not such a big difference. And we have got the rear anti-roll bar that I can fit at a later date, and we've just got to do the wheels, tyres and body shell now, and then it's hopefully ready for Wednesday night and get over to Mansfield again. But I'll get the body shell and everything done and then just do a quick video showing you what it's come out like. But thanks again for watching Wtf Rc Cars. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, share to friends and family, and catch you guys again in the next one.